We often talk about working on our business as opposed to in our business, but do we talk as much about working on ourselves as opposed to just our business? Well, today it's all about working on ourselves and how that actually impacts your business. Stay tuned. This episode of Keeping It Real is brought to you by Real Geeks. How many homes are you going to sell this year? Do you have the right tools? Is your website turning soft leads into interested buyers? Are you spending money on leads that aren't converting? Well, Real Geeks is your solution. Find out why agents across the country choose Real Geeks as their technology partner. Real Geeks was created by an agent for agents. They pride themselves on delivering a sales and marketing solution so that you can easily generate more business. Their agent websites are fast and built for lead conversion with a smooth search experience for your visitors. Real Geeks also includes an easy-to-use agent CRM. So once a lead signs up on your website, you can track their interest and have great follow-up conversations. Real Geeks is loaded with a ton of marketing tools to nurture your leads and increase brand awareness. Visit realgeeks.com/keepingitrealpod and find out why realtors come to Real Geeks to generate more business. Again, visit realgeeks.com/keepingitrealpod. And now, onto our show. Hey, podcast listeners, are you trying to figure out how you can actively prospect on Instagram, but you feel like you need more followers or more engagement? Well, Michelle Berman-Michael, who I've interviewed on this show, has created a program that will teach you 3 secret Instagram strategies. First, how to create killer content so you can get more views without needing a videographer. Second, how to effortlessly prospect using Instagram by spending minutes, not hours. And third, how to get more engagement than ever before without needing to post every day. Now, Michelle is so confident you'll love her program that just for Keeping It Real listeners, you can get her course, which is called Beyond the Method, for 10% off. Now, here's how to do that. Visit igcourse.com, again, igcourse.com, and schedule a free consultation with Michelle. Let her know that you're a Keeping It Real listener. Again, that's igcourse.com. And now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of Keeping It Real, the largest podcast made by real estate agents and for real estate agents. My name is DJ Paris. I'm your guide and host through the show. And in just a moment, we're going to be speaking with top producer Dani Hampton. Before we get to Dani, just a few reminders. If you want to help support our show, and we hope that you do, please tell a friend. Think of another realtor that could benefit from hearing this great conversation you're about to hear with Dani, and shoot them a link over to our website, which is keepingitrealpod.com. You can also nominate people in your local market. If there's some superstar that you're like, I want to know what that person's doing, let us know who they are. We'll reach out and we'll get them on the show. Also, please leave us a review. Tell us what you like about the show. Also, what we could do to improve. You can do that wherever you're listening to our podcast, whatever podcast app. We read the reviews. We appreciate you. And again, thank you so much for being part of our audience. But let's just get to the main event, my conversation with Dani Hampton. Today on the show, we have Dani Hampton with the Dani Hampton Real Estate Group in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas. Let me tell you more about Dani. Now, at just 33 years old, Dani Hampton's journey began 11 years ago when she bought her first home at the age of 19. Amazing. Inspired by the experience of selling that home, she dove headfirst into the real estate industry, obtaining her license at the young age of 22. In just 4 years, she launched her own brand with only herself and a transaction coordinator. And despite the challenges of being a new mom, Dani closed an impressive 52 homes and laid the foundation for her own real estate team. 5 years ago, Dani convinced her husband to leave corporate America and join her in building their real estate empire. Now, with his IT experience, they revolutionized their systems, making them more efficient and effective. Fast forward to 2020, when Dani's team soared to new heights, closing 147 homes without relying upon paid leads or cold calls. Again, 147 closings without leads or cold calls. Her secret? organic social media marketing, and a unique approach to branding. Now, sporting her trademark ball cap and t-shirt, Dani stands out from the crowd, even and also even wrapping, or she has her Jeep Wrangler wrapped with her own personal brand. I'd love to see that. You'll have to share that with me, and we'll share it with the audience. But anyway, I want everybody to follow Dani. Two places. I want you to go to Instagram and follow her. We'll have a link to this in the show notes, and it's the Dani Hampton, Dani Hampton. We'll have a link, and also check out her website, which is soldbydhg.com. Soldbydhg.com. Dani, welcome to the show.
Thank you, DJ.
Super excited to have you. You've done a truly impressive amount of work in 11 years, especially starting in your early 20s, which I can't imagine how difficult that would be to start working in real estate at that time. I've talked to other agents who have done it, but every time I've talked to somebody, I'm always like, how did you do that? So before we get to that, you bought your first home at 19, and then was that the catalyst to sort of saying, this is what I want to do for my life, or how did that come to be?
I think that it definitely helped because I was already in kind of like the real estate industry. I didn't see myself going into like realtor, but I was actually working in apartments. So when I was a leasing agent at an apartment complex, I kind of saw like, okay, well, if I'm I'm about to go into my 20s, where I'm already getting asked, like, am I going to college? What are you, are you going to be a stay-at-home mom? Because I was already married. I got married at 18. Probably not going to highly recommend that, but I am still married to him, so I guess I should. But no, I feel like we really just had everything happen, obviously with a purpose and a plan, because I think us buying that first home, even though we made no money on it when we sold it 2 years later, it introduced us to the realtor who planted the seed in my head that said, maybe you should get your real estate license.
Wow. And so at 22, you did that. And I'm sure all of us are thinking, well, what buyer or seller in their right mind is going to choose a 22-year-old? Now, obviously, you're not out there probably broadcasting, hey, I'm 22 and I'm a realtor. But at the same time, you are 20, or you were 22 and a realtor. So getting into leasing prior to that makes a lot of sense. I think that tends to be a little bit, I wouldn't say easier, but certainly more understandable that somebody at that age could help somebody with leasing. Obviously, not as big of a commitment as buying or selling a home, but you are now a realtor at 22. So, how did you start building your business? Did you go back to any of those people that you helped on the leasing side and said, hey, by the way, now we should talk about next steps in buying a home? Or did you have to start from scratch?
Is a combination. I think that one thing I knew I needed to do was that I needed to join a real estate team, because I knew that obviously, where am I going to get my leads? And if I'm not sitting in a place that has walk-ins,
Right.
then I'm essentially like, okay, where would leads come from? And then of course, just already like dipping my toes into that and knowing, okay, so what's a sphere of influence? How would I build that? And knowing my age in itself would be one of the biggest challenges, because most of my sphere of influence, either, if they're the parents of the kids I grew up with, they're going to need to see me in my career and trust me before they would actually go into a professional setting. And then my friend group, right? Like half of them were still living at home.
Sure.
And or didn't have the money. So I knew that I needed to go to a real estate team that had an established business.
Yeah.
And that in itself is where a lot of my confidence got built up. And just being able to kind of like soak up that, it's almost like you're borrowing confidence, right? If you're working in proximity with someone who has already an established business, I feel like the more I was able to hang around those agents, I was able to kind of soak up that confidence and be able to deliver that, which actually a lot of the times, not many people ask my age because they felt like I spoke with enough confidence and experience because I was borrowing that from other people.
Yeah, the borrowing experience, or borrowing language, or borrowing sort of tips and strategies from their teammates or the team lead, or just sort of soaking up, this is how people talk in this industry, again, probably does solve a lot of those. Well, I'm only 22, because it doesn't come up if you're able to effectively provide value, I think. And I also think too, getting married at 18 probably helped accelerate your maturity. I mean, it would just have to, I would assume, because you are now forced to live an interpersonal life with someone and be around them 24/7. Most, 18 to 22 year olds don't have that. Maybe they have roommates, or maybe they're in college, but other than that, it is usually a pretty solo experience. So I suspect you're probably, even your interpersonal skills, relating to others and being able to, you were living a real life by the age of 22, and
Yes.
had been for several years, whereas the rest of us are like, all right, we just graduated college, what do we do now what do I do, and how
I,
do
I
I?
have I have to tell you, I think really because it's almost like I need to have a bio to my bio because I left my home at the age of 15.
Wow.
I met my husband at that same time. I quickly had to figure out what I needed to do for work, how I was going to finish school. I got my GED.
Wow.
There was a lot of things that kind of I feel like did catapult me into a older age. And I kind of tell my
Sure.
husband, I actually kind of feel like I adopt his age a little bit because he's 3 years older than me. So I think there's a lot of just like, yes, I had to grow up a little early. And so there was a lot of like, people would assume I was older because I was married. I did have a little bit more inner confidence because I do have at least the social skills, the life skills, to be able to, get people to relate to me and, like me, know me, and trust me.
Yeah, well, that's what it's all about. So you joined a team, which was, I think, really wise decision at that age, because again, your age is working, to some degree against you, because again, your friend group are, still living at home, or renting, or certainly most of them aren't purchasing properties. And again, you're like, how am I going to actually build this business? Let's learn from people who have come before me. And I think a lot of agents could benefit, even if they're 1 or 2 years in the business, if they're not getting the success they need, or they don't feel like something's missing and they can't quite solve it. That, I think, joining a team is not a terrible way to go for a few years, and really sort of understanding, oh, this is how it's done. And then eventually, you can leave if you want to. But I do think it's an underutilized sort of thing. And I do encourage our listeners, if you feel that, you could use a leg up, and you're not really getting that one-on-one support or training from your firm, and not every brokerage provides that is a great idea to reach out to a team leader. uh,
Yeah.
I so I want to talk a little bit about building a team, because not only were you part of a team, but then years later you built a team, and you are still building a team, and you're consistently, constantly redefining it, and figuring it out along the way, and adding people, and then people drop off, and then and I know how that works. Everybody who runs a team knows the how that is. But how did you go about deciding that you wanted to build one yourself?
So I knew that I couldn't do it alone. So I mean, even with I think it helped a lot with me being on a real estate team to see how they operated. So let's just say I already saw the good, bad, and ugly of real estate teams. And then I decided, okay, I don't know if I had a big picture of what I wanted to build, which I would highly recommend that you start there. But in the moment, because I already had a referral system that was coming into my business, and because I was already balancing that parent life, I knew that I had to have somebody else that could at least answer my clients when they have questions, especially someone who would help me with paperwork because, in probably every job now, they all give you personality assessments, but they of course did that in the beginning of my career, and I don't even think I needed an assessment to tell me I'm not great at paperwork. I'm definitely not the administrator. So I knew that I needed assistant help, but when I realized that I needed to have other agents on the team that I could leverage my listings and help bring more buyers in, and I was seeing how the opportunity could really present itself to where, hey, we build a brand and we can also have leads come into this brand and basically create that win-win, because I'm going to create I'll build all the tools and resources for you. I just need bodies
Yeah.
essentially
Yeah.
that can be there to service the clients. And I knew that was probably where the team started to kind of build, because my brand, everything I did for marketing, this is what I say I'll do, this is what I did right, and then this is what I did wrong. um, I built my brand, I built everything on the marketing side, and then I didn't have like the foundation of standards and expectations, and basically what those expectations in itself, I think, is probably what needs to be highlighted, because I didn't necessarily know what to expect of team members, because I'm only seeing what I'm pouring in. And when I realized that we didn't communicate what I expected on the other side, I think that's where people start getting that confusion of what does my team provide and what do I provide?
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. This idea of standards is really, I think, really interesting. And I think for those that are listening that are thinking about joining a team, it is important to talk about that when you're interviewing teams to maybe join, or when you're building your own team, to really have a well-defined standard of practice, and really having, okay, when somebody emails us at 11 o'clock at night, like, what's our process? Like, do we have to respond to it right away? Do we respond to it next morning at 8 a.m.? Like, whatever the team wants to do is fine. But just knowing that, okay, I know for sure that's getting responded to within a certain amount of time, or we, when this happens, I do, someone does this. And that is really, really important, because of course you've built this incredible brand for yourself, and you probably do everything, very, meticulously, and because it's your name, it's your brand, it's your business. And then bringing on team members, they don't always share the exact level of perfectionism or sort of diligence. And so I think it is probably really important. So do you feel like with your team now you have a better, well defined, here's the expectations for what we're going to do each time we get a client?
Yeah, there has been definitely a learning process over this last 5 years of just constantly redefining that and revisiting them. Some of those standards, I feel like, they tend to change because it's either based off the market conditions, right? I had to build certain standards and expectations when we had multiple offers all the time.
Sure.
And then when there gets to a market where it's a little bit slower, where people are able to sleep at night and put offers in a couple days later, I mean, I think that expectations just get changed a little bit. I would say, just as a side note for any realtors who are listening, that I feel like you should have expectations and standards for your clients. Even if you weren't team building, I think that
Absolutely.
having that clarity just helps ease both sides. But as far as like for team members, I think that having those standards and expectations, I just feel like you have to kind of remind yourself like why you're in that position. Because I feel like as a team agent, I don't necessarily know if I ever saw myself leaving real estate teams to build my own team until I stopped seeing the value of the team.
Yeah.
And I think that as a team leader, we have to own the position of kind of consistently reminding them why they're here and why we're a team together. Because as much as it's, glorious to have a brand that has your name on it and you did all the hard work to put that logo together and everything, there was a point, I think, in the last year that I had a really good, like, honest and raw conversation with my team that was like, you guys are making more money than me. Like, I am spending so much money in everything to try to keep this roof over our heads. And in all honesty, getting the conversation of, hey, I'm not happy with splits, or I don't feel like I'm getting what I need. Um, it's a hard, it's a big pill to swallow as a team leader. And I know other leaders feel this way because I've networked and masterminded with them, that it's like, hey, we both kind of have to be reminded why we're doing what we're doing. And those unmet expectations sometimes creep up really fast, because they tend to change.
Yeah, I agreed. And I think that having a North Star, sort of the knowing the whys and reminding, like you were saying, it's like writing a mission statement for a business. And then a year later, you're like, didn't we do that a year ago? Does anyone remember what it was? So, this idea of writing out standards and sort of why we're doing the things we're doing is great. But our brains are pretty fickle. They're not great at remembering things. And we should have a process where regularly we're communicating with our team or our brokerage. Here's why I do this. Here's what I need. Here's what I can offer. Those three things I think are really, really important. It's just like, again, I'll just repeat them for anyone listening. Is, what do I need from the team, or what can I offer the team, and why am I a realtor? What am I, what value are we providing, would be the fourth. Why should someone choose our team, right? And getting everybody on that same page can be tricky, and because people have different specialties and different personalities. So I can appreciate that hustle, but I think you're so right. It's the most important thing is to really understand the value of the people you work, the values of the people you work with, because if you know their values, you can somewhat predict their behavior, right? And if their values, if you don't know them, then it becomes more erratic. So I'm curious, when you look for a team member to join you, what do you look for? This is be great advice for any of our listeners who are thinking about maybe joining a team.
Yeah, so um, I think having similar work ethic definitely is a key factor for me, because I notice that when I am around someone who is a little bit more slower paced, even if it's not said, because maybe they want to, maybe they want to be influenced by me, by one of my skills or whatever it might be. um, I don't think people realize how quickly I move. And so I work really fast. I talk really fast. I talk at a very loud, tone. So there's a lot of things where I'm like, I kind of have to know their ability to work in an atmosphere that might feel a little fast paced, because I think we kind of have to have a similar, almost North Star. I'm like,
Hmm.
are you looking to grow? So something I've actually put into my values is that I need someone who values personal growth,
Yeah.
because I think that I'm consistently working on my own personal development, and I do expect my team members around me to have that same type of drive.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny. I do a similar thing in my personal romantic relationship, which um, I'm in a newer relationship, and one of the things that we both have agreed upon, my partner and I, is that if we both continue to grow ourselves and work on our own baggage, our own insecurities, our own glitches, whatever you may want to call them, that likely the relationship will get stronger as a result of working on an individual effort. Because a lot of times, individual challenges show up in the way we treat others, sort of, unconsciously. Even we're upset with ourselves, we take it out on our partner, or whatever. So for us, in a kind of a different way, but in a similar way, I'm doing a similar thing. It's like, my partner and I, we talk about the things we're working on individually for our personal growth. And it's, it sounds kind of silly, but it's really helpful, because I'm like, oh cool, she's working on this one thing. I can start looking for that, and maybe even give her feedback on how it's going if she wants that. And then, we're just more in sync, more communication. So I firmly agree that, whether it's a team, we're doing this in our business too. We are all reading a book right now called The 21 Immutable Laws of Leadership, or something like that. Anyway, and we're all taking chapters, and every week we report on our chapter, and it's a personal growth kind of thing. And it helps. It helps. So I love that looking for that in a teammate. And also too, if you work on yourself, your business will get better, your relationships will get better, your health will get better. everything improves because you're raising your own standards.
Absolutely. I think it definitely creates some kind of balance. It gives you connection. And that's something too, where I feel like as I honestly becoming a team leader has been the biggest blessing in my life because it really has set this higher level of accountability. And that higher level of accountability to me, because it's kind of like, I guess I also see that as parenting. When you're now responsible for another being, then all of a sudden you start kind of looking inward going, oh, how am I showing up? And so then when you start that in business, I mean, it's a very uncomfortable feeling. But I was like, okay, I have to get up to the office at this time because I need to really lead by example. And there's been a lot of instances over this last 5 to 6 years that I believe truly has contributed to my own personal growth and development because I have people looking at me, and it's not just my kids,
Yeah.
it's these grown adults. And shoot, some of them are even older than me, and it doesn't even matter because we there's a reason why we're working together. We want to improve some area of our life. Usually they're coming to me because they want to improve their professional and financial world. But I think that there's so much more to that. I think that's what brings you in the door. I think that what's has separated team members before has been the fact of like, you know what, I'm really not willing to grow at that pace. And I have probably been on like a 10x journey for the last couple of years because I've done so much inner work in the last 2 years that I feel like it's now going to the other side in the professional world to where people are like, that's way too much. Because I've figured out a lot of stuff that I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to show up different. I'm going to be different. But I also now have higher standards of the
Yeah.
people around me. And if you're not willing to make those changes to meet those standards, then I mean, we're all going to be uncomfortable.
Sure. Yeah, no, I it is absolutely right. I mean, it sort of reminds me of that expression, and well, I'll have to ask the audience to take a little bit of a leap with me on this one, but it really has to do with I always love this. I heard it from Brian Tracy. He used to say, prospecting solves all problems, and he wasn't necessarily speaking about real estate. But if we think about like why do people leave the industry, lack of leads, lack of business is probably the reason, or burnout, I guess maybe. But burnout, I see very rarely. I see a lot of people leaving for the reason of they aren't burnt out because they didn't have enough business. So prospecting, does kind of solve all problems related to business as far as staying in business, because you could be the worst realtor in the world, but if you have leads, like you're going to do okay. And of course, you don't want to be a terrible realtor, but you could be if you just had enough leads, and you could probably still exist. And so this idea of personal growth is kind of the same thing. It's just like you always, personal growth kind of solves all problems because it'll sort of raise your standards, it raises your output, and it then encourages, or leading by example, shows other team members, here's where we're at now. And again, not all team members will always make that transition, and so certainly teams can fluctuate over time as standards change. So I think that's a really, really wise thing. So we've really said a couple of things. Just look for teams that have well-defined standards of practice, have well-defined values, have some North Stars that they really live by and remind their teammates about. And then also what we were just mentioning. So I think that's some great suggestions for team either leaders or people looking to join. I want to talk a little bit about your branding because you did something incredible, and I'm sure you guys have had incredible production since this, but in 2020 this is particularly interesting that somehow you, during the pandemic, which agents largely weren't working, of course, as much. Some states they weren't able to work at all, but you were able to work, and your team closed 147 homes that year. That was a tough year to do that. So tell us, and by the way, not just closed that many homes, almost 150 homes, you weren't buying leads and you weren't making cold calls. So tell us sort of how you did that, because I know social media is a big sort of lead gen source for you, but you have a particular sort of unique approach to it. So do you mind sharing sort of how you approach social media?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, first off, I did a lot of failing forward with social media in the very beginning. So, as many people keep getting to this mindset of, I need to look a certain way or sound a certain way. Yeah, you just got to post, just post and just keep moving forward. But I noticed what I did differently was, I'm really just bringing the human aspect into social media. And I think that, so most of this came from Facebook, just to clear anything up, because now that we're talking about this in 2024, I was not a TikToker. I was not very active on Instagram. I definitely did more on Facebook. But it was all about trying to create community. And I feel like the tips that I give and coach agents on with social media, and to do it on an organic level, is that, first of all, just the general rule in real estate is you got to get yourself to be a person that someone can like, know, and trust. Well, now figure out how to be someone you can like, know, and trust on social media. And when I hear that, I feel like I'm looking for someone I can relate to. And I think that the thing that I knew, I needed to separate myself. So I decided I was not going to be the Lexus driving realtor. And which is funny because I did buy a Lexus when I made my first $100,000. So after having two Lexuses, I figured out my true identity and I traded it in for a Jeep. I also started just wearing ball caps and t-shirts, and man, did I piss off a lot of agents in my area. And I just knew in that moment, I finally found that inner confidence with myself that I was doing real estate for just a handful of years, that I felt I knew who I was. So I wanted to show who I was. And I just knew in my life, I was like, nope, I just don't want to dress up for appointments. Well, I brought that into my social media world because I wanted people to feel comfortable with reaching out to me and being like, you know what, guys, this is me. This is how I show up. And it really brought down that. I wouldn't say that they didn't treat me like a professional, but I feel like that trust factor happened a whole lot quicker because I now kind of almost felt like their realtor friend. And so I feel like that sphere of influence that I was building became so much larger because I started to get referred to more and more people, and the way people were able to reach out to me, well, be where they are. That's what I
Yeah.
tell a lot of people. I'm like, just go be where they are. So even if you're calling leads, try to find them on social media because that's probably where they're hanging out. They don't want to be at work. They're probably scrolling their phones. And so if you're able to connect with someone when they don't have that big wall up, right? The don't talk to me, like it's the same one that goes up when I go into a mall and all the people in the middle want to try to get me to buy something. I have that wall up. But when I'm on social media accounts, I'm usually wall down because I want to connect with people.
Yeah.
So I feel like the biggest thing I did was just being a real person online, showing who I was, giving enough content that allowed people to connect with me, and then just being a social person. So you got to go talk to a lot of people, lots of conversations, lots of comments.
Yes, and what I like about the sort of the attire situation where you're talking about, hey, I wear a t-shirt, I wear a ball cap. I don't have any judgment upon whether that's appropriate for or not, because everyone can make up their own decision of whether that fits with their own personal, sort of dress values. However, here's what is irrefutable. If you're showing up every day on social media with your videos and your pictures, and you are wearing a ball cap and t-shirt, and that's your costume, so to speak, or your uniform, so to speak. Well, that's what people would expect when they meet you in person too. So it's not whether it's a good idea or bad idea for somebody to decide. Whatever someone's personal brand, style brand is, like, I don't think it matters. I just think choose something. It doesn't have to be you wear the same clothes every day, but have some sort of style. And then if you're providing value it almost doesn't matter much what you're wearing. But this idea of having a brand, and also too, I think, Dani, I think you're doing yourself a huge service by dressing down. And I think that would probably fly in the face of a lot of people's sort of assumption that, well, maybe she's making it harder because she doesn't maybe dress as professional as other agents. Well, if we look at the results seem to suggest that nobody seemed to care, that at least in 2020, when he sold almost 150 homes. So the results speak for themselves. But here's where I think it does actually help you, because if they can see your results and see that you're a high producing team, and my brand is that I dress down, but it's not like you don't look sloppy. You're just wearing,
Mhm.
less business casuals
Casual.
type of,
Yeah.
yeah. And in a weird way, when I see somebody who's at the top of their game or the top of that sort of industry dressing down, I'm like, oh, that person must really know a lot, because they're not trying to impress me with their. And I know that sounds silly, and I'm sure not everybody would have that reaction, but these are people who have been following you on social media. They already know what you dress like. They already know how you speak, what you're into. You talked about being authentic and honest. So you just show up in your regular uniform, and yeah, of course you would. Like, why? It would probably be more unusual if you showed up in a really fancy dress, for example. They'd probably be like, I don't know this Dani, I know the other Dani.
I think I actually got a few of those comments before. I might have like shown up after some kind of photo shoot that I did or something, and I did try to dress up, and then people would be like, "Who is this?" I think, just to really tag on to the being authentic and being honest, I mean, the more I showed up as myself and the more that I actually just talked work. So there's a lot of real estate agents, I feel like, that struggle with talking about real estate online. And it's either that they don't want to be too salesy. I get the word salesy a lot. And I'm like, if you don't want to be too salesy to the people who follow you, but I'm like, but that's who you want to hire you. There's been so many listing appointments that I've walked into that I never had to give a presentation to. They already hired me before I walked in the door. So to me, I'm like, because I've shared what I did. If I didn't tell basically the consumers I want to call me, I'm like, I'm constantly advertising. And yes, there is the atypical just sold, just listed types of posts,
Sure.
but that doesn't prove anything to me. So I'm like, to the news, like, so this is actually what I didn't know I was doing back in 2020 that I actually now have a strategy for. But it's just truly just going, people just need proof, and they also need something to connect with.
Yeah.
So it's super helpful when you're able to go, hey, I just helped someone who totally didn't feel ready to list their house. We went through multiple stages to get their house ready to list. We did actually do some improvements to their house. I was able to help with that because I have the resources and the people to help them do those things so we can improve their value. Just seeing that type of actual proof and seeing where that person ended up, I feel like is that connector. Because I have actually a story of just someone who I didn't even know was following me. That was a sibling of one of my past clients. They've been watching all of even the talking stories, just me just getting online and talking. I apparently one day said something, and both the husband and wife called each other and they said, "Did you see Dani's recent thing?" And they called me up and they're like, "We're ready to move because of one thing I said." And I'm like,
Amazing.
you just gotta, it's almost like you just kind of gotta overshare. And if you're not proud of what you're sharing, then that's where you probably need to fix something. So it's that value piece.
Yeah, boy, that it happens to me on the podcast occasionally. A smaller version of that, where, because podcast listeners often are very passive. They're not necessarily, chatting or writing comments or leaving reviews. But I always love when someone goes, "You said this one thing," but it's usually not me saying it; it's the guest saying it. But I heard this one really great thing from one of your guests, and you're right, and that's that it can be just that simple. And so when you think about content for social media, what kind of content are you putting out? And when I say that, I'm specifically asking, personal content, private life, personal life content that you're willing to share, and business content. So how do you figure that out?
So, I guess I kind of feel like a lot of my audience possibly might relate to the things that I'm into or the things that I do every single day. And so, if I'm just balancing life with my kids, they're ages 9 and 5. So the entertainment levels that I have to bring to these kids, because just so you know, they hate commercials. They have let me know this weekend that they cannot watch anything that has commercials because it's just the longest 3 minutes of their life.
Yeah.
But I think as far as I just kind of look at my life and I'm just like, what's something that someone can relate to? So personally, in my life, every single day, I'm just like, what's something that they can relate to, and how can I share it? And so this could go from I think of all different levels too. I think of like, what's the things that people aren't sharing, right? Like, what are challenges in life that maybe someone needs to see that someone like me, who people could think is, doing pretty well in life, that I'm struggling with.
Sure.
And so yeah, I tend to have vulnerable moments online.
Love it.
I try to hopefully lead it somewhere. It's not just the poor me post. It's more of a, hey, you know what? Life has challenges, and this is what I'm doing about it. Um, like, even to the point of, I think actually after 2020, when I sold 147 homes, I didn't do anything for my self care. I had no self care regimen, no nothing. I was a workhorse. I didn't do anything to contribute to my marriage. I didn't do much to contribute to my parent life either. I was really just in survival mode. And everything since, I have been sharing online of figuring out that daily routine that fills my cup up before I fill anybody else's cups up. And definitely with my career now, I feel like there probably is a little less real estate and a little bit more personal life. But I think that's where, like I was sharing before, people want to connect with people. And then if you end up building that trust factor as a person in that person's world, um, then obviously, I start to sprinkle in the, houses we're selling or things that we're doing for clients. And then they're like, oh, and they're in real estate. Of course, I'm going to work with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this idea. You mentioned sort of being so busy that other parts of your life, took a hit. And who couldn't relate to that? It's happened to all of us at some point. We overfocus in one part of our life and other parts of our life suffer. And so you talked about, hey, I wasn't really giving my marriage the attention that it needed. Maybe my children as well, or whatever, fill in the blank with personal, physical health, spiritual health, emotional health, whatever, interpersonal relationships, friends, family, whatever it might be, financial. And everybody can relate to that, right? Because in fact, I suspect that balance is imperfect and there's no way to ever actually achieve balance. So we're always out of balance. And I think the trick isn't getting in balance. The trick is knowing where you're unbalanced and just making slight adjustments along the way to where things are as balanced as they could get. But again, it requires some vulnerability to talk about these things that maybe aren't always like, hey, look at me, I just sold $1 million home. We want to share the successes because, of course, those are fun and we know that we're going to get a good response to that. But sharing the vulnerability, sharing the challenges, like, hey guys, I had this really great year, but it really took a toll. I really wasn't able to give my primary relationship enough attention. And can anyone out there relate to that? Well, here's what I'm doing to fix that. Everybody can relate to that, right? Anybody in a relationship knows what it's like when a relationship stops growing and people go through, peaks and valleys. So like, that's a universal experience, right? So no matter how busy somebody is, at some point in a relationship, both people, go through a phase where they're just not as actively working on it, or one person isn't. So I love the idea of sharing something like that on social media because, number one, it's honest, it's vulnerable, and it's something that is universal that we can all relate to. We've all had these experiences, and we expect people on social media to be superheroes. Really, we only see people's best moments most of the time on social. So this idea of being like, here's maybe the less perfect parts of me that I want to showcase. The reality of it is people actually bind to imperfection versus perfection. We actually bind to struggle and challenge because we all go through struggle and challenge. So I love that you're talking about that.
Let me even share. I shared at the beginning of last year, and this is where I feel like I got almost a whole new community starting to follow me because I shared that I discovered my ADD, and which is funny because I feel like a lot of people who've known me has like, you just found that out.
Like we've known this your whole life.
And so I think that when I finally shared that, I actually just decided to really find a way to control it and to understand it and to work with it without going to the assumed upon Adderall or one of those really big name drugs. And so I knew that I needed to share that just so that way maybe it could be another piece that people could relate on. And the response to it was just incredible. To have other people going, you know what, I didn't even think about, maybe some of the challenges you spoke about maybe aren't the first thing to think of when you think of ADD, but because you listed it, now I'm researching it. And so, and that's where social media has really changed over the years, because I mean, there's a lot of us who probably don't watch the news anymore. There's a lot of us who is kind of going through other people's life experiences and seeing how how they're being influenced. And so, yeah, that's what's obviously has contributed to my own personal development and everything, is because if I can be a positive influence to others, then that's what I hope for. And I kind of been changing my mindset to being someone who lives in abundance. So in hopes that I attract the right clients and the right team members and people into my world because of the positive things I'm doing to contribute to my community. That's kind of been my focus, especially over this last year. And the other piece of it too, because you asked about the social media content. Yes, I'm sharing vulnerable stuff. I'm sharing, the highs and the lows. I'm sharing even things that we're doing in our marriage to strengthen it. We're going through a lot of that. As far as the real estate side, I think we need realtors to really get a little bit more creative with the situations that we have presented to us almost every single day, but how to actually market that online for people to understand, like, there's so much more behind the scenes in real estate than the just listed and just solds.
Sure.
And I think that the facade of someone only calls me when they're ready to make a move. I've been recently changing a lot of my content to be like, actually, I just had a listing appointment for someone who wants to move in 2025.
Awesome. You know what? I love that. I love that so much because people need to hear that. Consumers need to hear this, that, hey, I know, I'm now talking to somebody who is not going to make a move for another year. And here's what we're doing right now to get that person ready. So if you are thinking of doing something in a year or two, call me because I can start getting you ready. I can start helping you along the way so that, and again, a great opportunity, because what do realtors typically do when they reach out to their sphere and they talk to them and do their, pleasantries? Then it's like, hey, are you thinking about making a move right now? No, I'm good for a few years. Okay, cool. I'll just stay in touch. And they're not necessarily thinking, okay, you have 2 years to go. Okay, great. I'm going to start reaching out to you with some ideas, some tips. Let's get you there so that when you are ready, or if an opportunity comes up between now and then, that you are ready to go in the event where, maybe the market shifts dramatically. Again, this idea of just like, helping people where they're at, which is what you said, is
Yep.
really, really important. And of course, we know that, staying in touch and communication is everything. So I love that you do that. I think that is
Well, and the other piece of content I've put together is, so we're a husband and wife team. And so I think my husband didn't realize that I was just going to consistently con him into becoming a realtor one day. And, I started with, you'll work operations. And then slowly now he has been working more and more as an agent. And he's not necessarily like the person who's going out there and doing all the lead generation, but he kills it on the listing side. He just has a more analytical way of looking at things, and I'm definitely all visual and marketing and creative, and he's very like data analytics, which honestly, with the market we're in right now, you need someone who's obsessed with the numbers. And so I've honestly taken a drive on my marketing side to be like, you know what? First of all, I think we can help probably a lot of couples who are just like us, who are trying to make a decision. I'm the emotional one, and he's the logic. Where is the logic?
yeah.
And so I'm like, we just had a listing appointment the other day, and he ended up taking lead because they really were just like, you know what, we want to cut past the BS. Like, we already know why we want to move. We just want to make sure it's a smart decision
Yeah.
to list our house right now because the numbers might not be in our favor.
Right.
And I was like, so you guys really want like the data, the numbers, that type of information? And they said yes. And I said, all right, here's Josh.
I have just the guy for you. And by the way, that's another really important reason why teams can be super effective is different people, of course, have different buying styles, different evaluative styles, and knowing your style or your preferred style or what you communicate most effectively, and knowing your husband in this case and all your team members, knowing their styles. This, of course, is you don't have to try to be something you're not. You can just pass the torch, be like, great, my partner right here happens to be my husband. He knows all that stuff. So I love, and again,
I'll add one more note on that, just because I've had a team member on my team who, because like I said, I'm loud and I'm fast. And not a lot of, I've had buyers in the past who were not loud and fast, and they needed a personality that was just a little softer and just a little slower.
yeah.
And it just helps. And I communicated that a lot with the team to be like, sometimes you're going to get leads that don't necessarily match you. And unless you're able to have that emotional intelligence to adjust and match them, it is always in your best interest to pass that lead to an agent who is probably going to best service them, because what you're doing is you're keeping yourself from other opportunities because you're in constant adjustment mode. And I learned that through this 11 years to be like, you know what, it's uncomfortable to adjust myself all the time.
Yes.
I'd rather just go figure out who I best work with, and then we'll just be able to have hopefully a team setting that allows everyone to be helped.
And you just said something so wise, and I want to sort of throw this out there for our audience in case they didn't also have this thought, that if you are a solo agent, and most agents are individual practitioners, if you have a particular style of communication, maybe it's more of an emotional, interpersonal, like I can really, make people feel connected to me, or, and again, it's not an either or for example, I'm better at analytics and I'm better at factual, logical sort of information, or, whatever it might be, whatever someone's, knowing your own personal style that works well for you is really important. Because again, when you, as an individual agent, if you were to find, somebody who isn't really going to understand the way you communicate, and maybe you don't have a husband who's in the business who has those traits, you should have some other agents that you can refer business to, saying, hey, I got the perfect person for you. I'm not the right person in this particular scenario, but my buddy or my friend or my colleague, so-and-so, they're going to be so much of a better fit. And then you maybe even consider teaming up with that person, more officially. But I think having those go-tos, and we all think about go-tos with respect to referrals in other states. Obviously, we have to have a go-to there, but having a go-to in your own local market, and I don't mean just somebody who works an area you don't work, somebody who works a client you don't really do well with. Because if your close ratio for these kind of clients is only 50%, but this other person has like a 90% close ratio, well, I would rather take 30% of the transaction, give it to somebody who's going to close it, and save myself the headache of trying to communicate in a style that really isn't me. Now, easier said than done, because we don't want to, of course, give up business. That's hard. That's not easy to do. But Dani will tell you, I'm speaking for her, but I'm sure she will say, one of the smartest things you can do is not work with clients who aren't a good fit, because they will sort of just wear you down and drag you down. And it's not even their fault necessarily. It's just not a good match. So have you had those experiences where you wished you would have, ended a relationship, a client relationship, maybe before the closing itself?
Yep. I think that I mean, honestly, I think that 2020 experience, right? Like in that moment, I felt like people were kind of coming in like floods. And we realized at that moment, we accepted everyone. And
Sure.
that's where I was even sharing like how agents really need to have their own standards when it comes to clients and the way they work, and their own standards for themselves. Because I think that when if you let a client treat you however they are going to treat you, and it might not be personal, it's just their personality, their style, whatever. And that's, again, goes back to that inner work stuff, right? I now realize why a lot of people react the way they do, why I react the way I do. Maybe it was the way I was raised. Maybe it was the way they were raised, whatever it is. The communication style is so big. And if I have someone who basically calls me and is like, I'm going to always need to talk after 10 p.m. at night, I know I am not my best self after 10 p.m. at night. And I'm probably going to be highly emotional, and they're not going to like who they're getting. And so I'm like, you know what? Then we're not meant to be. I mean, and they might be like in a job that just because we did have a client who needed to talk to us at a very odd hour because of them being across the world.
Sure.
And that's okay. So if there's another agent out there that's a night owl who doesn't mind working in the middle of the night, then that might be their clientele. For me, I'm going to say, you know what? Leave me all the messages you want after 10 p.m. at night. I'm always going to return your messages at this time of day. And if that doesn't work, then let me find an agent that works best for you. So yeah, finding a lot of people who need to talk super late at night, I am not their girl. And I also know, for me too, the someone who might need that hand holding, which is fine, but I tend to struggle if someone needs that reassurance of maybe why they're buying a house every single day while they're buying a house. And I'm like, if we always feel like we're about to jump off a bridge, then I'm so sorry I didn't do you a favor in our buyer consultation to make sure that you felt prepared to go through this experience.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's just been I feel like a whole book of different scenarios, and I'm like, I either could have approached the beginning consultation a whole lot different, or also just understand that, hey, this is how I like to be treated. This is how I like to work. And if it's not okay with you, then that's where we know we're not a good match.
You just said something really, really important that I think is probably one of the keys to your success, which is, here's what you didn't say. Oh my God, I had this one client. They were the worst, and I just had to get rid of them. By the way, does everyone have clients like that in their experience? Of course they do. But Dani didn't say that. Here's what she said instead. And I think this is really important. She said, we had if I have a client who's every day going, gosh, I still don't know, maybe I shouldn't, Dani didn't say, well, I got this wishy-washy client, she doesn't know what she's doing. She said, I didn't do a good job of prepping this person or making sure that this person was ready. Dani is taking responsibility for the breakdown in communication or the breakdown in the client, not the client. I love that you said it that way, and I don't think it's an accident you said it that way. And I'm sure there are times when you just have crappy clients. You're like, I just got to get rid of this person. They're a disaster. But and that happens, of course. But I love that you said it was really me that didn't probably do a particular thing most effectively. And if we can think about our clients like that it's probably us more than it is them, it doesn't mean we have to beat ourselves up, but taking that responsibility allows for growth, right? Allows for like, okay, next time that happens, here's what I'm going to do. And I love that you said that. And I want to honor you for saying that, because I heard it, and I don't know that you even meant to say it that way, but I love that you shared that, because I really personal responsibility is something that's I find that to be a very common trait among top producers. They take responsibility, and you just did that. So I just wanted to honor
A
you
lot of
for that.
mindset work for sure. And I think that's where, I mean, going into like the last couple of years, I've just put myself around people that I want a positive influence from, and the way their language is huge. So the
Yeah.
language of the people that you surround yourself with, or even just the people you follow. So something I put in one of my social media classes is that, you know, pay attention to who you're following, because these are the people that you're getting influenced by. And if someone else is constantly talking like, you know, negative about their clients, then I kind of feel like that part of your brain is going to be what's running more when you are with your clients and
Yep.
you're looking for those things that you can also complain about. And so, yeah, I think that taking that personal responsibility, and at the end of the day, it is our choice, you know, like no one is forcing you to be someone's real estate agent.
Right.
And so, I think that in reality, if you change your mindset into abundance, you figure out who is that client that you truly want to help. And the more and more I got specific about who I want to help, and who I'm best fit for, absolutely has changed my life and my business. Because
Yeah.
I was even speaking about that of, I don't have clients who call me at all times a day. I don't have clients that they actually don't even call me on the weekends.
Yeah.
They typically send me a message and they say, "I'm so sorry to bother you at this time of day."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm like, I don't think there's probably a good percentage of agents that don't have that.
Right.
And I think it's just uh, how you present yourself, how you know, hold those standards up, and then also start attracting the right people into your world.
So, if you are listening and if you are an agent in the Dallas Fort Worth area and you're not getting what you feel you need from either the team you're on currently, or your brokerage, your managing broker, or your coach, and you want to work with a team that has high standards, but also is a lot of fun, but really has amazing processes. If you struggle with process, and by the way, we all struggle with process. So, or at least I do. I mean, I can certainly relate to that.
Yeah.
And this idea of learning with a team, growing with a team, being pushed, I think the vast majority of us need accountability. So a team, if nothing else, should be a place for you can go for accountability. If you are wanting to see what else is out there, Dani and the Dani Hampton group would love to chat with you to see if you'd be a good fit. And I would encourage anyone listening who does approach Dani, think about what you can offer their team. Start with that. Hey, I have an idea for you guys, or I think I can bring this to your team. Not just what can I get from Dani and her team. Come with value. Probably be well received. And so, if anyone out there is interested in learning more about Dani and her team and wants to, I mean, geez, I would join your team because I would save years. No, and I don't mean that sort of in a cute sort of way. I mean that very sincerely, because if I moved to Dallas Fort Worth, I know nobody. I don't have a sphere of influence. You have all the systems built. You started with basically nothing. So I would appreciate that. You started with, at a very young age, and you did it a very specific way. And you have a lot of wisdom, and you're only 33 and you've been in this business 11 years now. So there's a lot of growth that you still have to continue on, because your career is still in its infancy. But you're able to bring people with you as you continue to ascend. So if you're somebody who's out there looking to join a team like that, and you probably should consider it, reach out to Dani. Again, it's the Dani Hampton, Dani Hampton on Instagram. And you can, Dani, what is your website again? I apologize.
It's good. Sold by dhg.com.
Sold by DHG, Dani Hampton Group, sold by DHG.com. We'll have links to that both in the show notes. I want to, on behalf of our audience, thank Dani for coming on today. Gave a ton of great advice and lots of really impressive strategies for how agents can move their business forward. Notice we didn't talk about today the NAR settlement, inventory being low, interest rates being high. We didn't, because none of those things we can control, but we can control some of the other things we talked about today. So let's use this as a great reminder of taking responsibility, taking accountability, and let's improve our standards, right? So
I want to thank Dani on behalf of the audience. I want to also thank the audience on behalf of Dani and myself. Thank you for making it to the end of the episode. We appreciate you. The audience, you guys are the reason we do this show. I am so grateful that you listen. Dani is grateful that you were here to hear her story. Please share Dani's episode with another agent. Think of one other agent that could benefit from hearing from Dani today. She gave so many great ideas. And send them a link to either our website, which is keepingitrealpod.com, or just have them pull up Keeping It Real on any podcast app. Hit that subscribe button. Also, for all of you listening, if you are listening on a podcast app, please leave us a review. We certainly appreciate it. Let us know what you think of the show. We are looking to always make changes as well so that we can continue to meet your needs more effectively. Dani, thank you so much. And we will see everybody on the next episode.
Thank you.